Welcome to True and Unpolished. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love. Let's get authentic, everybody. Boundaries, y'all. We're talking about boundaries. Carrie Graves returns to talk about it with us. You know, we only have so much of us to give, right? And that is true for everybody. You know, everybody only has, a certain amount of time and energy. You know, the sun rises and the sun sets, at least it appears to. So it becomes really important that we manage that time, that energy that we have really well so that we can take care of ourselves and then take care of each other. So we're talking about how to have healthy boundaries in relationships. Take a listen. Sounds like you have a true going on
Yeah.
around boundaries.
What I'm learning in over the years in my life, definitely have known for years that I am codependent and that I had some issues with boundaries, being what I've now learned is the compliant boundary type, where I'm afraid to say no and I'm afraid someone won't like me. And that's all mixed up, in a soup with codependent. And as we've talked about on other episodes, I really, in an unvarnished way, love and trust people. And it hasn't bitten me too many times, but the times that it has, that gets your attention. And I've done some work. And then what I'm realizing now, I had an episode in my life a couple of months ago that was just a big boundary violation, and it really shook me. And I have been working on it with my therapist. I have been reading Henry Cloud's and John Townsend's book Boundaries, which I can't believe I had never read that. I've known about that book for years. And so what I've done is taken this episode that happened and respected it. It has felt very holy. It was very hurtful, but I just knew it was a big, important moment. And so I'm trying to sit with it and have been for a couple of months and ask, what does this mean? Learn as much as I can, process, and then carry that to other places in my life. And so I'm having ahas about places where I thought, well, maybe I'm doing okay. And then just realizing, oh my gosh, your boundaries here are terrible. And if you can just set them,
Yeah.
things are really going to shift. I feel like I'm just waking up at a new level. And also understanding that for me, because my container is Christianity, how biblical and how Christian they are, and that it is my duty to the divine to set boundaries.
Yeah, I have to tell you that this is the same. It just, of course, is really synchronistic and feels like something that, I am sitting with too. And it's actually been the past couple of months also. And it's, around my resignation and trying to, like, I really thought I was doing a good job with boundaries. And then I saw that I was not, and I thought, what is going on? I thought I was doing well.
Like you, I thought, hey, I'm doing pretty good on boundaries because I respect others' boundaries. But really, what it is I do accept and respect their boundaries. But sometimes, it's not as authentic as it might be, is what I'm learning, because I still internalize and feel rejected. But I know I don't want to cross that line for them or whatever it is. And then the other thing is, I think sometimes I assume boundaries for that person that aren't there. Well, that is codependent and, stepping on their boundaries because it's not allowing them to have their own boundary.
Can we do a refresher, do you think? Because I also am very codependent, and I think that it would be nice to just kind of define that. Can you define it in your own words? What
Okay, so on my journey, I read Codependent No More by Melody Beatty, and that was a real game changer. And that book says there is no one definition for codependent. But for
Ah,
me, what it is that I look to others to validate me.
right.
So, my example for that is always when my husband and I owned our bookstore. If someone left the counter having purchased something not smiling, I felt responsible and
Oh,
upset and worried. And like when I read that book, what I realized is like I need to allow that person to be not smiling, to be
right.
unhappy, to be, I just needed to get my book. And like I'm dealing with a whole bunch of shit at home. It's not,
Yeah. No, yeah, you can say it. I'll tell people there's a curse word.
whoops, I'm dealing with a whole bunch of stuff at home.
Yes.
It's none of my business for them. It's only for me to just serve them
Yeah.
the best I can and let
Yeah.
that go. And that was a real wake up call for me about 20 years ago. And I thought I was, doing pretty well with boundaries, all things considered. But it's coming back around big time. So,
I read that. So I read the same book. And for me, a great example, well, I don't know, great. Is that the way you say it? Probably not. But I I believed because what I witnessed in my very beginning, foundational relationship, um, and relationships between my mother and father, it was, you know, a codependent relationship. And so I didn't know that it was codependent. I thought it was love. So I thought
mm,
overgiving was what you were to do, or
oh,
over expecting was what you were to do.
yeah.
Uh, and so I had to kind of parse it out. And I've learned, one of the lessons recently around my resignation from Unity was that I also very early on, had to parent. I had to parent myself. I had to parent my mom. I had to parent my dad. And I have to say that my sister did parent me. And I'm so grateful for her. And I'm grateful for my mom and dad too. I didn't mean to say that I wasn't. It's just they,
Mhm.
what I witnessed between them was, codependency, not love. And so I didn't know the difference. And that was true also in that I didn't realize I was creating parent-child relationships in my work, and that
Yeah.
I was being the parent because I thought, I mean, that's the only relationship I know how to have. You know what I mean? And so,
Well, yeah, that is so interesting. So maybe this really does get back to boundaries. So I'm always the child,
mm,
even though I've carried the responsibility in a
yes.
lot of ways.
See, that was me too.
It's so interesting because in our family dynamic, for sure, I've joked with my mom about my brother, who is wonderful, and I adore him. And I always thought there was something different about him. In our family, two of us are nines and two of us are ones, so we're all real close. There's not a lot of the dissonance that might be on the Enneagram within this nuclear family. But I was like, there's something different about him. And then a few years ago, it hit me, and I was like, you know what, Mom? He's the only one of the four of us that isn't codependent.
Oh, that's the
It
difference.
just struck me, and he sets, he does hold boundaries and protects like what's his, just in a natural flowing way. He's not really worried about what someone else is thinking, and that's what really struck me.
Because boundaries can mean many things. Like we've been giving different examples of very different
Mm-hmm.
kind of boundary things. Um, and I use Byron Katie's saying, which is there are three kinds of business: my business, your business, and God's business. Whose
Wow.
business is this? And try to check in. And I use that tool a lot to try to start to form boundaries when I started to think, you know, take on someone else's problem and make
Mm-hmm.
it my problem. And it's really helpful. I would say, okay, whose business is this? And it really works too with my anxiety when I am projecting some horribleness into the future,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I recognize that the future is not my business. The future is God's business. That's not mine to take on.
That is really helpful. I had not heard that, and I will take that away with me today for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Our business is right now, and someone said it might be recently that I heard The Practice of the Presence of God, a book by Brother Lawrence, that if you take care of the present, the past and the future take care of themselves.
That's right. That's right. If we
Because
attend to this.
yeah.
And so my business is what is in front of Lydia right now and
Mm-hmm.
in this present moment. And how can I show up, for her in a loving and supportive way, and honor her. And, you know, I've been doing so much stuff around self-love. And I find that
Yeah.
because I began to intentionally practice self-love over the last couple of years, boundaries occur naturally. They just come naturally when you practice self-love.
That makes so much sense. And you made me think of something from the book that, because I've had a bunch of ahas. And there's an example in there of a guy who is trying to love others. Self-love is such an important part of it, but he didn't really have self-love. So he came to Dr. Cloud and was like, I mean, I'm a good person. I help people all the time. I do this, I do that. I pick up their groceries, and Dr. Cloud challenges him and says, that's not love.
Yeah,
What do you mean? How could that not be love? I mean, I take care of Lydia when she's sick. I do,
yeah.
that's love. He's like, that's not love. That's a lack of boundaries. He's like,
Yeah.
you got to take care of you. You should feel awesome doing those things, not burned out, not resentful,
Mm-hmm.
not exhausted. You should feel so free. And
Mm-hmm.
that freedom, that word really, really struck me. Free and open and so happy
Mm-hmm.
that you're doing it. Love is not a chore and a
Right.
task.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
So I've been quiet over here.
I know.
you
Hey
And
there.
have.
hey, so I guess what I'm kind of considering is because my boundaries are different. I have rigid boundaries, and boundaries are, quote unquote, not a problem for me. But I think it's an issue. I mean, rigid boundaries are as much of an issue as a lack of boundaries, because we want boundaries to be movable. And so some of the things that you're talking about, like codependency or saying no or standing up for myself, aren't really a problem for me because I think my boundaries were violated whenever I was younger in a way that made me kind of say, screw you. I'm not like, you're
Mhm.
not going to hurt me. So, I think that's the opposite of what a lot of people do. We put up walls to protect ourselves too. Even kind of sitting here, listening to you all, the two of you have a discussion, what I was thinking about is not showing up for ourselves in other ways sometimes can be a lack of boundaries. So not putting ourselves out there, or because the boundaries are so rigid.
Yeah. And I liked what you said. You
Mhm.
said boundaries and walls. And I thought, oh, that's a good thing to ponder. Like, is this a boundary or is this a wall? Like something
Yeah.
that's boxing me in and keeping me imprisoned. When I find that a boundary is rigid for me, because really boundaries are case by case, person by person, relationship by
Mhm.
relationship. You can have an overall theme, but it really,
Well, and I think there's generalizations. I mean,
sure.
being able to say no when I feel like that's the right thing for me is a pretty good generalization.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
my saying no and it being the wrong thing for me doesn't mean it's not the right thing for somebody else, right?
Right. Mhm.
when I have the most rigid boundaries, what I do is project onto other people and feel like they are lacking because they don't have boundaries. Like I'm thinking, you need boundaries. You need boundaries. And that may be true. And if I go back to the test, whose business is it? My business, their business, or God's business? Well, their boundaries are their business. My boundaries are my business, staying in my own lane.
Well,
Yeah.
unless it interferes with you directly, then it's
Sure.
your business.
Yeah. And then that's where we come into relationship and have to talk with people about what has happened. And that is like so hard for someone like me. I mean, it's just an extreme challenge. And for other people, it's not hard at all to speak their mind about how something made them feel. They're not afraid of what someone else is going to say in response. But I think you bring up a great point, Mary, because one can be too rigid and not open enough at times for one's own journey, whatever that might mean. And then there's other kind of boundary issues. Another lack of boundary is when someone's like super aggressive and doesn't respect someone else's boundaries. They have a lack of boundaries. And then the other person
Right.
could be over here like me, who doesn't know how to put up a boundary, and I have a lack of boundaries. And then you've got, you
A
got
mess
a
on your
real
hands.
Holy mess.
We all said it at the same time. And
It's a big old mess. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, Mary, because I tried to navigate that with, my husband, because, his lack of boundaries definitely impacts my life, and
Right.
so we've been navigating that. And of course, we just had a couples session because that's the way the universe works. And we were talking about this very thing. But it's because he has gotten very clear on boundaries in a new way. And it's like I can breathe
Wow.
again.
Wow.
Oh, I can breathe because I can trust you. I can trust you, out there in the wide world, not to bring, yuckiness back here to home,
So I think that is a really good point too, because when we, like Lydia sets boundaries in your life, Lydia setting boundaries for Lydia, then it has a ripple effect. And what happens is if we set boundaries, then either people get in line and on board with that, or they fall away.
Yeah. But fall
And
away can look really yucky.
right.
And that's what can be scary, but we have to be brave enough to know that the boundary matters. And if the falling away is what has to happen and it's in a healthy way, that,
then that's the right thing.
That's the right thing.
Right isn't always easy.
No, that's what's so darn hard. And in the book too, it really helped me to learn something that you guys just said, is that it has a ripple effect. And so my lack of boundaries, trying to please people, is damaging. It's like, what do they call it? Like harmful neglect. And that was an aha for me on my journey too, when learning that I was a 9 on the Enneagram and a codependent one at that, be that people pleasing thing, it can do a lot of damage. And you think, gosh, I'm trying to make everybody happy. I'm a good person. I'm a nice person, like that guy in the book. I'm a loving person. I help everybody. I do. No, it's weird. You don't have to be outwardly mean and violent to cause harm. And that's kind of a shocker too.
Well,
And so
one of
I've
the
learned that
things,
it's our duty to set boundaries. And this book talks about it from a biblical sense, like how Jesus set boundaries all the time. And he gives a lot of examples from scripture that are really, really helpful.
That's awesome.
It's been amazing.
well, I was just kind of thinking about, as somebody who sort of says no or says what I think, like when I'm confronted with a boundary situation, a lot of times I've assumed that other people will do the same, and that has definitely gotten me in trouble. Because I don't think that's the norm. I think a lot of times people don't say the truth because of fear or whatever. But I kind of value people who are willing to tell me the truth.
Yes.
What do y'all think about that?
Oh, that's our point of health for sure. I mean, I'm on the flip side of that, Mary, and I want to be like you because I also value that. I remember when I was running the cathedral bookstore that I used to run, I had a bunch of volunteers, and I had to line them up and schedule them and ask them to work on Sundays and stuff. And the part of me that likes to please people is like, oh, I just don't want to, I hope that this is not inconveniencing them, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
codependent. So a couple of them said to me, he's like, they're like, you can always ask, I'll tell you no. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. You tell me
Yeah.
Yeah.
no if it's what you need. And
Yeah.
you'll tell me yes because you want and are willing to serve when it works for you. And
Yes.
so that, I started to learn that, but I think it's so important and I respect it and I'm really trying, but it can be so hard. But it's not what is hard about reading this book is hearing that, like, Mary, if I'm not telling you the truth and you're assuming that I am, but I'm trying to take care of your feelings or please you,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to hear that that's not a good and right thing to do. And that what is so scary for me is that I have to say, because I love you and I value your relationship so much, I need to say, what's true for me. And it's a scary thing for people in this position.
None of us want to hear no either. So,
Yeah.
it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because you want to be truthful, but also you don't want to hurt people. And most of us don't want to hear no. We want to hear yes.
This really is points to, I think, what we in our culture as women have been taught. Girls are to be nice. We are to be
Yes.
nice. And
Yes.
I cannot tell you how many awful violations have happened to me because I needed to be nice, you know?
Yeah.
And it's toxic. Nice is different than, or love is different than nice. Love doesn't always say yes. And, love
Right.
also protects, Lydia. Love protects us. And
Yeah.
I just wish so much because it's still there, it's still there. And what comes to me mostly is situations where I have felt vulnerable to someone that had authority or to
Mhm.
someone that I was bigger than me, and usually these people were men. And so I just wanted to be nice. And
Right.
man,
And you're so right. Thank you for saying that because it comes back to me from time to time. I feel very fortunate in my life in this time as a woman from the South, but more and more I'm realizing, especially women in the South,
yes,
even in a more progressive church, if you're a church person, like everything is telling you, whether you take that on or not. I did happen to take it on, like you said, Lydia, to be nice. And one thing this book talks about, if you're a person of faith, I think it would apply to any faith that has oppressed women in one way or another, is that that's not right. That's not what the faith is really saying. And so, but people take the message of the Bible or, the message of love and forgiveness and think that having boundaries is not doing those things when really the opposite is true.
yeah. And so my mom and my sister and my niece came to visit recently, and it was just the most beautiful visit, life-giving visit. So happy for it. And my mom, believes very firmly that the man is the head of the household.
Mhm.
So what that led to was my father, who was mentally ill and didn't leave the house, he was the head of the household, right? But
Yeah.
but he wasn't anyway, it was puzzling. But
He
that,
wasn't capable of
right.
caring
Mm-mm,
emotionally, physically,
no, he was not. And
socially.
so they were here, and I am talking to my husband. And I just said to him, do you have the boys? Because I'm going to go do this. Do you have the boys? Yeah, I got the boys. And so then I go out, we all walk out the door, and he comes to me and he said, well, who's going to take the boys practice? And I said, did I just ask you if who's going to take the boys? Do you have them? I'm going to go here if you have them. And my mom walks back in and she goes, come here, darling. And she gives him a hug. And I said, what she's saying is, please don't divorce my daughter.
Because she's so bossy or something.
Yes.
So how are you working to create more in your life as far as this topic of boundaries is concerned?
Well, that was popping into my head earlier. So it's interesting. I tend to think of create more as like, meditation or doing art and those things, even if they're around hard stuff, are to me, not to everybody I know, but those are like life-giving and like fun, if you will, and going for a walk, even if you have to think about something hard. Well, what I've realized is the way that I have to create more, or that I will be able to create more, is that I have to start putting up more boundaries than I've learned to so far. And so what I decided is that I will do little things first that I catch and now become aware of that I do, and try to just notice those and be really solid in those. And then I can have harder conversations. But it's
So
so,
like
I mean, it really is so hard.
so like acknowledging yourself when you do it, like giving like
Yeah.
cheerleading yourself, like yay me kind of thing. Is
Yeah,
that what you
like
mean?
Mary and I, to my knowledge, and I know she'd tell me, don't have any conflict. But let's say we did, Mary, and I needed to talk to you about that, but I'm not ready to do that yet. But like next time you say, do you want some of these snacks I made? And instead of me just wanting to say yes so that you'll feel good that you made snacks, I'm going to say, no, I'm good, thanks. Little
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But as I practice and start to build and the energy shifts within me, it shifts around others. So
Absolutely.
that was how I decided I can start to create more and start to get comfortable in the skin of knowing that this is my obligation to be my truest self. I've got to do this work. But
Yeah.
this is not fun for me.
No,
Yeah.
But it's
boundaries,
healing.
it is healing. And I think, one way that I do it is the tool that I already shared, which is, whose business is it?
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a good one. And I can't take credit. It was Byron Katie. She taught me that one.
That's
And
awesome.
I think that becoming aware of where of past relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because if they're past relationships, they're past for a reason. So I can look
Yeah.
back, and that's easier sometimes than looking at right now. But I
Oh,
can look
yeah.
back because I have some distance from it and say,
Mm-hmm.
where did I not have boundaries in this situation, in this situation? It feels safer because I don't necessarily have to have any conversations with anybody. I actually do have conversations with these past relationships, but they're just very one-sided, but they all
In
win.
your head.
They end really well. They end
That's
so well.
I like that, Lydia. That brings up one more. This could be maybe an unpolished moment for me just because it surprised me. So this summer, I was in the mountains with my parents, and there was a lot going on. Mary was there part of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a lot for my parents to have a lot of people in the house. They love the people, but a lot going on. And so I was trying to, I'm always worried my mom's going to feel stressed or overwhelmed. And I was trying to help. And we were talking about it on the porch one night. And I was like, I just, want to help with this. And I want you to not feel this and you to not feel that. And she said, you're not responsible for my feelings.
Yeah,
And I
amen.
was like, what? I was like, oh my God. Like it was just like she dropped a truth bomb
Hmm.
through that
Well, that's
grenade.
really a gift that she gave you too,
It
because
was.
it gives you permission to let that go.
It is. And the fact that she said it really brought me up short. It led to this other thing that's been going on in my life. But it was like a precursor, and I really thought about it. And, I talked to her more about it, and I was like, wow. So that means I can just, let you do you and not worry about you being upset or being stressed out or
Yeah, Mary, how do you want to create more flexible boundaries? You can take a second.
Well, I think that have been practicing that for a while. Like, I don't make assumptions as much as I used to.
Hmm.
Like I already know the outcome. Practicing mindfulness and meditation is something that helps center me, going on walks, doing creative practices, all of those things. What they do for me is they help me stay in my truth. And
Hmm.
so instead of making assumptions, making judgments about situations, then I can kind of sit with it. And that's a big one for me, is that I don't make decisions as soon as something comes up. Like I'll sit with it, I'll sleep on it. I'll have an emotional reaction and I want to react to the situation. And so by sleeping on it or sitting with it for a while, I generally make more soulful, effective choices
Yeah.
and respond in a way that is healthier.
So next time, Carrie will be back. She's going to come once a month, I think it is. So she's going to come back, and Carrie, tell them what we're going to talk about then.
we're going to talk about synchronicities, which, according to psychologist Carl Jung, are meaningful coincidences. Most
Yes.
of us think they're, the divine nudging
Oh,
us along.
absolutely. I was about to start jumping into the conversation right now, but it's not for right now, everybody. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Let's see what happens next.